Hey everyone, so another day. I'm beginning to start all these videos off like that. Anywho, another day, more progress on the Supra. I've left the primer for a few days and the seam sealant to obviously, harden and cure like it should. Now I've gone ahead and gone over a few other areas and over the actual seam sealer with the actual U-Pole primer again, just to make sure that a few, obviously, of the problematic areas that were prone to the rust have got a second coat, and obviously everything around the seam sealer is properly primed. It's got all the crevices and everything, so that should be the end of that. I'll probably go over with a bit more seam sealer in those areas, but I'm going to start right now and begin the bed lining on the actual rear where the tank sits, because I actually want to try and get that entire area back together. I want to get the tank back in place, even if I'm not replacing the line just yet. I want to just get all the brackets and everything, all bolted up, all situated back where it should be, so at least it's not dangling in place and just looking really horrible. And so I've actually got some extra garage space without tripping over a tank all the time. It's not fun. Anywho, I probably need to get some sort of work done on the actual fuel tank shield itself. I'll need to look into that. It's got a bit of rust on it. We'll see if anything's penetrated through. If it has, I suppose I'll try cut that out and try my hand at welding. Hey, if I start on that, I can mess it up and fix it and make it look decent, and no one will pretty much see it underneath the car. So let's practice our thin metal welding on that first instead of the car. Probably a good idea. Probably a good idea. Anyway, let's go along and see how well this works. I'm going to try it on some cardboard first, just see what the texture and everything looks like, what the spray pattern's like, just so I know what I'm in for. And then we'll start spraying it up. Let's do this. Okay, it's day 2, and basically yesterday I decided, in addition to doing the bed liner underneath the car, I decided, let me go ahead and actually start doing the front rail of the engine bay, essentially, and the chassis rails. Because the wings are off and everything there's obviously been exposed metal over the years, and it's got like little bits of surface rust here and there, from obviously the fender sitting on it, and you get like that little microscopic movement, that little bit of movement, little things like that, and just scratches from the engine bay being an engine bay. And basically I just did a rough mask off of a few areas and just did a test paint around it, and the result was actually pretty good, better than I expected. So in addition to that, I'll probably take the bonnet off, or the hood as the Americans call it, off, bolt it off with the brackets, and mask everything off properly, and actually go over the essentially the entire front area where the cowl sits on top, because that as well also got a fair bit of rust underneath it. Surface rust, but still rust. My entire aim here is to get rid of it all. And about the bed liner, it's rather lackluster. I'm not happy with it at all. It could have been a lot better. I was expecting something more like Raptor liner, but it's really not. So I'm probably just gonna get Raptor liner and just do Raptor liner underneath and save myself the trouble, because 2 cans, essentially 1 liter of this stuff, and I needed 2 to 3 coats for it to be any sort of good. And I suppose for a smaller area, fine, but I'm doing essentially the whole chassis underneath, and I don't want to have to go over it again, because I want to put that subframe in and just forget about it. I don't want to have to take it out and redo any work under that car again. It's been awful. It's been awful. So let's go ahead and go check out my handiwork from yesterday. Bear in mind there is a fair amount of overspray because I decided to just give it a test run. I should have masked things off a bit better, but with the shops and the current situation of lockdown, it's a little hard to try and get some supplies, but I'll be ordering at least more masking tape and everything else that I need. And I can do it properly. Let's go check it out. Well, and basically you can see everything's obviously been seam sealed up and around and in the different spots I needed to get it in. I mean, it doesn't look pretty, but in the end, I will go over it with a Raptor liner instead. I mean, it's definitely got like a dampening effect sound to it. I mean, it's supposed to stay a little tactile, but even just my nails, you can see, just cause damage to it, and I don't know how that's going to hold up against any sort of stone, you know, flying around in here, getting dislodged from within a groove of a tire or something. So that's just, it's really not something I'm going to want to have to deal with again. So I think Raptor line is definitely the route I want to go, just for that, you know, that extra security, because there's been a lot of work and I don't want to have to redo any of it. I mean, the finish isn't bad, but I definitely want a lot more protection out of it than I think it's going to give. So yeah, Raptor line is definitely going to be the way forward. So here's essentially everything I got done yesterday. You can see the actual primer itself looks really, really good. It's a bit of a softer primer still. You can still feel, even after it's sitting for a good, I'd say 14 hours. No, longer actually. It's still a little soft, so it'll definitely benefit from having a clear coat, or even when I'm done, just a dusting of the actual Toyota Silver over it, just to, you know, blend it in, give it a better look. Because if you look at the existing paint, this is essentially what everything else looked like. It's just all the little spot welds have got this little bit of surface corrosion in them, all around the edges. Everything's all really scuffed and dirty looking, and it's essentially what the whole bay and everything else looked like. And I mean, now it's definitely a big transformation, minus the overspray. But I am thinking of essentially just moving everything out the way and possibly painting the rest of it. But it's one of those, how far down the rabbit hole do you go? I mean, it's definitely worth it, but how worth it though? Because it's, yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth it. I mean, if you look at this versus that, it's a big difference. And I've also noticed the seam sealer over here is doing the famous cracking. So I'm going to need to pull that back down as well. Put more seam sealer in there. So that is basically everything I got done slash, there we go, done yesterday. Like I said, the primer was more of a test in the bay. There was a quick mask off here and there, see what it looks like. The paint was awful anyway, so give it a go. What I will do is, obviously there's a lot of like imperfections and everything, and I'll go over it with a fine grit sandpaper, actually sand everything smooth, actually use that primer, I think, to actually flatten the surface, make it look really nice, and then probably use, you know, the Toyota silver and actually just go over those areas in the silver just to actually make them look a lot nicer. I mean, they weren't silver to begin with. They're more of a, you know, the Toyota OEM primer. It's a bit different shade of grey. I'd say it's it's probably lighter than this cap, but not nearly as dark as the one that I'm using at the moment. So I think I'll use this one as a good surface protection, and then actually just go over it in silver. The bay will look a lot better in silver versus, you know, grey primer anyway. And I'll probably go down the rabbit hole and do the actual strut tops and everything else, and, you know, the top of the wheel arches, and yeah, it looks like I'm gonna do that. Just torture myself a little more work, but I mean, given the current climate of things, I've got the time. I've really got the time, so I think I'm gonna probably start stripping that apart soon. I'm gonna leave the bonnet on for a while, because without a garage it's just a pain, and trying to store the bonnet in the garage it's just gonna get damaged sitting in here. So I'd rather just leave it on the car until the day that I decide, okay, everything else is done, it's all primed and ready, take the bonnet off, prep the little area around it, prime it, sand it, you know, the whole 9 yards, and then spray everything one go, and then go ahead, you know, do it all properly, and then give it a clear coat and go from there, just to protect it, because given that it's engine bay, it looks like it's going to obviously receive a lot of punishment, so it's probably just worth doing it properly. Why do I get myself into these kinds of things? This was just supposed to be a refresh of the rear subframe. I haven't even got to the rust yet on the sills. That's another whole interesting thing on its own. But I think before I dive into the engine bay, let me go ahead and actually get some work started. Alright, so I've pulled the majority of the subframe apart. It's just the last little control arms. Can't remember exactly what they're called, but they're unfortunately stuck in there. The bolts themselves have managed to, well, essentially weld themselves to the inner steel sleeve of the bushing. So literally nothing gets them out. The other side I've already beat it multiple times with a hammer. Penetrating fluid, everything in there. It's it's just not coming out. So my only result now is I'm gonna have to cut down here with a grinder each side to actually cut the bolt out. I'm gonna just grind back the welds for this bracket here, pull it out so you can actually get the disc down there, and chop these suckers off, and then I'll go ahead and weld that back on later once everything gets put back together. But literally both of them on either side have done the same thing, so it's just ridiculous. Makes no sense whatsoever why they've decided to do that. Well, the rest of it's all apart, and I gotta pull all the bushings and everything out of these, but I suppose I'll do that when I start stripping them down and ready for poly bushes and repainting. In the meantime, they can stay like that. I'm gonna focus on the actual body of the subframe itself and cut these guys out. Okay, that took an absolute age, but they're out. Horrible little things. To think they cause so many problems. Oh well. I can live with having to replace 2 bolts. Now all I gotta do is just get these bushings out, refurb the control arms, put poly bushes in. Obviously once I strip this whole thing back, I think I might actually just get rid of these exhaust hangers here. These ones aren't being used. Probably just make it easier just to refurb and grind everything back with these out the way. Oh well. Suppose I better get after it.